Welcome to the American Association of Anatomists' Living History of Anatomy, which documents the professional lives of prominent AAA members. I'm David Burr, Professor and Chair of the Department of Anatomy and Cell Biology at the Indiana University School of Medicine. It's my pleasure and very great honor to introduce a man who has impacted my own career in anatomy through his contributions to the association and his model of leadership, Dr. Robert Yates. Dr. Yates is Professor Emeritus in the Department of Structural and Cellular Biology at Tulane University School of Medicine. He served as chair of that department for more than 30 years, from 1972 until Hurricane Katrina literally changed the landscape in 2005. Welcome, Dr. Yates.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Originally, I knew Dr. Yates from his leadership roles in the AAA. Dr. Yates was Secretary-Treasurer of the AAA from 1988 until 1996, and later was President-elect and then President from 1999 until 2001. He served on the FASEB Finance Committee throughout the 1990s and was Treasurer and then Vice President of the International Federation of Associations of Anatomists. Dr. Yates is an honorary member of many anatomical societies internationally, including those of Japan, Italy, Romania, Costa Rica, South Africa, and West Africa, as well as the Pan American Congress of Anatomists. He received an honorary doctorate from the University of Oradea in Romania and is a Fellow of the Royal Society of Medicine, a very prestigious honor. Dr. Yates began his research career studying the chromaffin system using light and electron microscopy. He also studied the arterial wall in the region of the baroreceptor nerve terminals to understand the age-related hypertension that sometimes accompanies aging. These studies provided insight into how vascular alterations increase blood pressure. His work on the carotid body offered new insight into the mechanism of action of the chemoreflex of the carotid body. Through these and other studies, Dr. Yates presented nearly 100 papers at national and international meetings and published 84 peer-reviewed articles in the literature. He published a book in 1977 on the male reproductive system. Dr. Yates had a long and distinguished teaching career, winning many teaching awards while at Tulane. Maybe he'll tell us a little bit about the Owl Club as we go through this, and served on 80 master's and PhD committees, directing 9 doctoral dissertations. Bob, why don't we start by having you share a little information about your early life and those influences that contributed to your career development.
Well, let me say this. I'm happy to be here with you. It's good to see you. And my early life, let me start by saying I was born in 1931, February 28, 1931. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, and my dad was with the U.S. government. This was back during the Depression years. There was a terrible loss of money during those years. Individuals had a great deal of difficulty with that, and my family being one of that group. My dad was with the federal government, and he moved around a good deal. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, and then we moved to Atlanta, Georgia. We lived there for a year or two. We moved to Texas for about a year or two. We also were in New Orleans, Louisiana for a couple of years. And we lived also in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, which is where the University of Alabama is located, even currently located as well. But most of my early life was in Montgomery, Alabama. And we lived there for, I lived there for probably 15, 16 years, something of that nature. I went through high school in Montgomery, Alabama, and applied to various colleges after graduating from high school. But I was immediately accepted at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. And so I went there as a freshman student, and during the first 2 years, I really didn't have my mind made up about what I wanted to do with my life. But it was after the second year, I would say, that I decided that I really would like to become involved in medical education. And so I took courses, taught students and took courses involved in that particular subject.
Was there a particular event that made you come to that decision?
I really don't think so. It just was my basic interest in biology that I think brought me into that position.
Mm-hmm.
So at any rate, I went, after the second year of education in college, I began to teach pre-medical students and that sort of thing, and I did that for a couple of years. Just in the last year, working towards a bachelor's degree, I applied to medical school. I really wanted, I thought, to go to medical school. And initially I was not accepted to medical school, but at this particular point there were really thousands and thousands and thousands of applicants for the medical positions in medical schools. So I was put on the hold side. And then I got my degree, my bachelor's degree with a major in biology, and I had to make a decision about what to do with my life. So I decided I would go to graduate school at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa in the biology department. And I enrolled in that. And when I enrolled, I was accepted to medical school. Then I had to make a decision about what to do. Go ahead with the master's degree or drop out of the graduate program at the University of Alabama and go to medical school. I really loved biology. So I decided to stay in that program and work towards a master's degree. And I taught pre-medical students during that period. It took me about 2 years to get the degree. When I got the degree, again, I was accepted to medical school in Birmingham. And then I decided that what I really would do would be to go to Birmingham to the medical school and just work on a PhD degree rather than an MD degree. I really wanted to do both degrees at the same time, but they wouldn't allow it. You had to either, if you were in the medical program, you had to go ahead and get a medical degree, and then you could go to graduate school. The graduate program in Birmingham at the University of Alabama was pretty new. I think, and don't quote me on this one, but I'm pretty certain that I was the first student in the Department of Anatomy at the University of Alabama in Birmingham. And I think some of the other departments like biochemistry, physiology, didn't have any graduate students when I first went, but they picked up graduate students as time went along. So I entered the program and taught medical students, and I was working towards an MD, a PhD degree, and then I would go on to medical school. It took me roughly about 4 years. See, at first it took me 2 years to get the master's degree, and now you're looking at 4 years to get the PhD degree. And the question was, really whether to go on to medical school after receiving the PhD degree or to be involved in teaching. So I really didn't make up my mind and really couldn't make up my mind at that point. I did research working towards the PhD degree, and I'll come back to that in just a little bit because there was a very early electron microscope at the University of Alabama when I was a student. But it took me 4 years to get the PhD degree, and I got that. Now, I might mention to you that the Reserve Officers Training Corps, ROTC, had taken me in when I was at Tuscaloosa. And the reason I took it, reason I went into that position was that they paid me a certain amount of money. I think it was, don't quote me on this one either, but I think it was between $10 and $20 a month, which was really a lot of money back in those days. I'm serious about that. Yeah, at any rate, they offered me that money, and I accepted it. And so I had an obligation to go into the service when I got my BS degree. I also got a second lieutenant position at that point. Well, when I got the degree, they talked to me about that, and I told them I was going to go ahead and work on a PhD degree, and so they said that was okay. I just had to wait until I got to the PhD degree, then I'd have to go into the service. So when I got the PhD degree, I did a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Alabama Medical Center, but I could only get about a half year into that postdoctoral program before they contacted me again about service. And so I went into the service. And now you're looking at another period of time before you could go on to medical school if you really wanted to go to medical school, that kind of thing. So I went into the service. In the meantime, let me back up just a little bit, because when I was in Tuscaloosa, my wife and I shared an office, but
Was she a student
actually,
too?
for 2 years we shared an office, a little bit longer than that.
Was she a student too?
She was a student, but in psychology. She was working towards a doctorate degree in psychology, and of course I was in graduate school most of the time I was with her, and we shared an office in Tuscaloosa. I put it this way, bless her heart, we were really not in love or anything like that. The only thing we ever did was have lunch together. I had a desk, and she had a desk in a given space, and we really never contact one another very much for a period of a couple of years. But when I got my master's degree, I decided that perhaps we should think about getting married, and she was very much involved in that. She appreciated that, and she felt the same way. So we began to date, and that was the first time we had really dated. Previously, I'd just walked home with her, maybe had lunch with her, sometimes having a little bit of dinner in the evening with her, but and then we would go back to the office and work, she on her own, in her own area, and me in mine, which was totally different. Then I would walk home with her at night, just walk home to help her get home. It might have been midnight after we'd worked together in an office. But finally we decided to, get married, and we did get married. But she hadn't received her doctorate degree, so she stayed in Tuscaloosa when I went to Birmingham.
I see.
We stayed separated for a period of about 1.5 years or 2 years, and then we joined one another. When I was in Birmingham, I got an apartment, and she came and joined me. She was teaching in Birmingham as well, in another university, not the University of Alabama, but she taught in another university, a different subject than what I was interested in as well. Though she did publish some electron microscopy.
She did?
She did. She did some work on the spinal cord.
Oh.
And, I come back to that if it's necessary, but she did, I thought, very good work. After, I accepted a position at the University of Texas Medical Branch, we worked together on that subject, and we published about roughly, I think, 5 papers.
So she was an early user too of electron
early
microscopy.
user. That's right. I'm going to come back to that in just a little bit.
Can I ask you to back up just a little bit? So you had an interest in biology when you were in college. How did that transform from an interest into anatomy specifically? At the medical, was this because you were interested in medical education?
I was interested in medical education, and also involved in teaching pre-medical students. They didn't dissect human bodies, but they dissected dogs. They also dissected fish and things of that nature. And it was my responsibility to keep those that dissected material, when they were not using it, to keep it.
I see.
And department had a space for that, and I would pick it up after they had completed a session and store it away until they needed it again. So I was very much involved with anatomy back in those days.
I see.
I think from the time I began, I would say probably the last 2 years of undergraduate education, I became very interested in anatomy, so I really enjoyed it, and attempted to teach as many students as possible. As a matter of fact, I had a class. It was really a laboratory that I was responsible for teaching pre-med students in Tuscaloosa, working towards a master's degree. And of course, when I went to Birmingham, I was very much involved with medical students back in teaching anatomy back in those days.
So did you develop your interest in research while you were in Birmingham?
Oh yes,
or is this
very much interested. Yeah.
And who was your advisor when you were?
Well, I had several advisors. At the, I was the first student in the graduate program, and they really were not certain about how to, how to handle students and things of that nature. And so I had several people I could call head professors. I finally published a paper with one of them. I have a copy of it there. I guess in a sense, he was probably the principal individual involved in my graduate education.
What was his name?
I have it.
Do you remember? On the paper?
A long time ago.
Yeah.
I knew him quite well, obviously, we're very good friends. And his wife was in the department as a professor as well. She was very good. So, but at any rate, I received my, when I received my PhD degree, I had to go into the service, and I went into the service. And when I completed the service responsibilities, I'd gotten married, and I had to make up my mind about what I really wanted to do. Did I want to go to medical school? Because, if I went to medical school, I had 4 years of medical education. Then I had 2 years of post-medical treatment and that kind of thing. And really, before I could do anything with making money, it would be about 6 years, maybe longer than that. It might have been 7 or 8 years. So I had to make up my mind about really what to do with my life.
Now, this was the late 50s by this time.
Yeah, that's right.
Late 1950s,
yeah, that's right,
okay.
Yeah. So what I did was I began to look for a position in the medical schools. And I had received my PhD degree, obviously. So I was looking for a position in the medical school, in the Department of Anatomy. And I looked all over the country, really. There were several, quite a few positions open in anatomy departments. I really just wasn't certain about where to go or what to do or how to, approach my life and all that kind of thing. So I decided to accept a position in the anatomy department, teach medical students, and then go on to medical school while I was at that institution, that school. So I accepted a position at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston. And Donald Duncan was a person who really was sort of in the same position as I was. He's about 15, maybe 20 years older than I was. And he always wanted to go to medical school. But instead he got a PhD degree because he just couldn't afford to go to medical school back in those days. So he got a PhD degree, and then he accepted a faculty position as a teacher of anatomy, and then he was offered the chairmanship at University of Texas Medical Branch, and that's a position he took. But he had no, should I say it this way, perhaps I shouldn't, really had no bad feelings about going to medical school. He really wanted to do that himself, but he never was able to do it.
But he was supportive of you thinking about doing it.
And there were other students in that department who had received PhD degrees who also went to medical school. So everything looked good for me. I'd go on to medical school, complete my degree. I was accepted to medical school at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, and I would go ahead and get my MD degree and yet teach first-year medical students with my PhD degree. Well, I was in the program for about, roughly, I was in the program for about 6 months, 8 months, maybe a year, somewhere right along in there.
In the medical program?
Yeah, no.
No, in the...
Yeah, well, I was taking a few medical courses as well. You're right, yeah, I was doing that. And the National Institutes of Health came out with Research Career Development Awards, RCDAs. And I've forgotten now exactly how they came to Galveston, but they wanted to see me, and I said okay, and I talked to them. And after I talked to them for about 2 days, 2.5 days, maybe 3 days, they decided to give me a grant.
That's a different process than we go through these days.
I'm sorry, it's a grant kind of, but it was really, yeah, all right.
But career development.
That's right,
award,
Research Career Development Award.
Yeah.
And so I accepted that grant. But one of the things that you could not do, and maybe if the grants still exist, I'm not certain about that, you could not go to medical school. You know, you could, the only thing you could do really was teach medical students, but they wanted you to do research. They wanted you to involve yourself in different programs of research and all that kind of thing. And I agreed to do that. And it was the grant I accepted was a 5-year grant. And I said, okay, after 5 years then, I'm going to go into medical school. you know, and the time just went along before I ever could get to medical school. So I accepted that grant and did research. And you know, I published, originally, I published quite a few papers. I had, the reason they gave me that grant was because I had published about between 25 and 30 papers. And then, you know, after I got that grant, I published another 25 or 30 papers. I had the grant for 5 years, but the interesting thing was, you know, I said, now, after the 5 years is over, I'm going to go on to medical school, I'm going to get that MD degree. And after 4.5 years, makes a lot of noise.
Wait for the clock to stop so that we can hear you.
Yeah. After 4.5 years, I was given that grant for another 5 years. That would be between year 5 and year 10. And you know, again, you could not go to medical school if you had the grant. So I decided, okay, I'll accept it. I'll accept the grant. And I did that. And I continued to publish papers. And it was during this period that I went to Harvard Medical School with Don Fawcett, worked with Don Fawcett and other people in the department to learn electron microscopy. And I want to go to that point because when I go back to the initial position at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, there were 2 electron microscopes in the department. They were very old electron microscopes, very difficult to use. Back in those days, microscopy had just begun, electron microscopy had just begun, and it was difficult to use them. So I decided I would go to Harvard Medical School with Don Fawcett. Don Fawcett was really one of the first individuals to get, well, I shouldn't say that because there were others as well, but not very many. People very much involved with the use of the electron microscope and research in electron microscopy. And so I decided to get involved in that. And I worked a good deal with him, and other people in the department as well. And learn new techniques and all of that sort of thing. And then when I left Harvard Medical School.
How long were you there?
I was there roughly about 10 months to a year.
Okay.
Somewhere right along in that area, and learning electron microscopy. It was a a very difficult topic back in those days. First, the preparation of tissues for study with the electron microscope, that is fixation of tissue, embedment of tissue, sectioning of tissue. The sectioning machines were different back in those days, very ancient. And when the tissue was finally cut with these instruments put into the microscope, and the tissue would move around in the microscope and that kind of thing, or melt away. It was the whole field was very different. So Don Fawcett was pretty much involved. He had some beautiful images he had prepared at the electron microscope level. And I might say there were other people in the department who were in that same capacity, really did fundamental work at the fine structural level. So I acquired that, you know, I really did. And so I went back to Galveston. And as I said, we had 2 electron microscopes in the Department of Anatomy. One of them was so old, you just can't believe it. I don't want to even go into the details of it, but it was so old that it was unusable.
Well, how long had electron microscopy been around at that point? Do you know?
It had been around about 10 years.
Okay.
But there were a lot of problems with it. You know, a lot of problems with it. And so I began to apply a lot about what I'd learned at the electron microscope level at Harvard Medical School to what I could do in Galveston. And some of my first papers, I think maybe you have seen them, were at the fine structural level. And I really feel like I contributed a lot. I really do. And really enjoyed it, and continued to do that, continued to use the electron microscope there, and all that kind of thing.
Well, that must have been exciting. I mean, that was fundamental information that nobody had ever seen before, or ever been able to acquire. I mean,
that's right, no question about it, that's right, yeah. And so I go back to that point in time, and really, again, you might not want to quote me on this 100%, but really there was very little understanding of the ultrastructure of tissues. Everything was done at the light microscope level, you know, and so whatever I could do, not everything, because some things were done at the fine structural level, but not many, probably about 5 different tissues. But everything that I could do would be a contribution to the structure and function of the different tissues of the body. And I worked in a lot of different areas. Adrenal cortex and adrenal medulla were the first areas that I worked on. But I worked in a whole lot of different areas at the fine structural level. And some of the original pictures that I made at the electron microscope level, they look pretty primitive now, but they were fairly good, you know, fairly good. We could learn a lot about different types of cells that we didn't know much or anything about. And I could pick roughly any tissue, any organ in the body, and study it at the fine structural level.
So why did you choose to focus on
adrenal cortex?
Yeah.
I liked the adrenal cortex. I was very interested in the structure of the adrenal cortex at the light microscope level, and the adrenal medulla at the light microscope level as well. So I became interested in electron microscopy of those areas. But that was not the only organ I studied. You know, I did a lot of studies of the nervous tissue as well, and a whole lot of different areas, and really made some progress with that. And you know, as I said to you just a little bit ago, I've got close to 100 papers, you know, and really did enjoy my contributions. And one of the things about this area is that you know, the American Association of Anatomists, where we still have our meetings, the American Association of Anatomists were very much involved with the, you know, the continued development electron microscopes and changing its focus in the study of tissues and that kind of thing. And so I was very much involved with electron microscopy and very much involved with the American Association of Anatomists. You might have some questions.
So, yeah, I wanted to follow up on that. Of all of the papers that you published, and they were numerous, can you pick one or two out that you think were the most important, or one or two of your most important scientific accomplishments?
Well, I believe that the work with the adrenal cortex and adrenal medulla were probably the most important that I did, particularly the adrenal medulla. Epinephrine and norepinephrine components of the adrenal medulla. I was very much involved with that, and the appearance of cells and the structure of cells and the modification of cells with function that I was very much involved with. And some other tissues as well, but that's, I think, the main one is the adrenal cortex and medulla. Really enjoyed it.
Clearly. So, beyond the scientific research part of your association with anatomy, what do you can you pick out a few of your many accomplishments in anatomy or in the association that you would that are memorable to you?
Yeah, let me back up just a little bit. Let's see if I can figure exactly where to start. Well, I was involved. Well, when I was at the University of Texas Medical Branch as a professor, I really never became. Yeah, I did. I became a professor when I was offered the chairmanship at Tulane University Medical School, and that was actually I was offered that position at Tulane University Medical School about 1970, but I couldn't go there. I had to wait until 1972 to go there. They wanted me to come for sure in 1971, but I couldn't make it.
Why couldn't you go?
Well, because I was involved with that grant and I was also involved with research, and there were students in the Department of Anatomy at Tulane, where I was at the University of Texas Medical Branch, and I was involved with their education and that kind of thing. So I had to stay on until things differed. When they knew I was going to leave, then they modified the running of a whole lot of different areas of the Department of Anatomy, at least as I was related to it. And so I then left and went as chair. So really, you know, you've asked me, and I think the question has risen at least, about what medical schools I was associated with. The University of Alabama Medical Center, I was never a faculty member in that institution. I did a postdoctoral fellowship, as I said, for about 6 months, something of that nature. And then the first position I took was at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston. And I was in that position for about 14 to 15 years. I accepted the position as a assistant professor, and I left that position as a full professor. So I was at the University of Texas Medical Branch, and at that time I was offered the chairmanship at Tulane Medical School. So I went to Tulane Medical School, and those are the only two institutions with which I was associated in my career.
You're loyal. That's right. You're very loyal.
Yeah, and I was in the position of head of the department at Tulane Medical School. And you got to also remember that when I accepted the head of the departmentship at Tulane Medical School, then all of the interests that I'd had in medicine, getting an MD degree and that kind of thing, was lost. There's no way you can run a department, you know that as a department chair. There's no way you can run a department and direct the activities of the department, direct the research and different members of the department, that kind of thing, and go to medical school. So I just gave up on that. I gave up on getting an MD degree at that time,
So your career path didn't end up exactly like you'd first envisioned it.
That's right, yeah. But I really enjoyed Tulane. Tulane's a great school. It really is.
Did you ever imagine when you went there as a chair that you would be the chair there for more than 30 years?
No.
You must have enjoyed it. You must have enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah, that's right. I really enjoyed it. And
developed the department.
Yeah, and also was very much responsible for the activities, research activities and teaching responsibilities of a fairly good number of individuals. Let me say a large number of individuals. Okay, let me say fairly good number would be better because it's really not a large number. I'm thinking of perhaps between 15 and 20, well, maybe more than that, between 30 and 40 people, individuals. Very much involved with their future and their education and
at the faculty level. But you trained or helped train a number of master's and doctoral level students as well.
I did. Yeah. And also at Tulane University Medical Center, we first had a MD PhD program. Students could apply to medical school. Mm-hmm. And if they were accepted to medical school, they would enroll in medical education. And then once they enrolled in medical education, they could let it be known that they also wanted to do research. And so they would enter into a PhD, MD program. Now, you didn't get both those degrees in 4 years, but it took about 6 years, 5 or 6 years. Some of them it might have taken 7, but most of them about 5 or 6 years to get both degrees. You see, I couldn't do that when I was at the University of Alabama. They didn't have any program like that. You either had to enroll in medical school and get an MD degree, or you had to enroll in graduate education, get a PhD degree. You couldn't do them both at one time.
Was this program at Tulane unusual for that period of time? Was this a newer idea that you could combine these and get both degrees?
I'm not really sure whether it was unique to Tulane or not. I think other schools, you probably have it at your school.
We do now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's probably seen all over the country. I'm not really certain about that, so I don't want to be quoted on. There may be some schools that don't show it, but don't have it. But I think there are quite a large number of schools now that do have both programs. Mm-hmm. And I had, in the 20 years that I was head of the department at Tulane Medical School, we had, I think, and again, I don't want to be quoted on this, I think we had about, over that period of time, we had about at least 15 students that went through both those degrees at one time. Oh. And 15 in 20 years, about one a year, roughly.
Through the anatomy department and combined degree. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So I really enjoyed that. You know, involving them in the research and directing their research and that sort of thing. The other thing I want to mention to you is when I became head of the department at Tulane Medical School, I really I had to be involved in the development of individuals who were faculty members in the department. I had involved in teaching. We also had the National Institutes of Health and training program and all that kind of thing. I was very much involved with that. And I really, truly couldn't get involved in research, the actual activity of doing the research myself, that I had at the University of Texas Medical Branch. I did all of it myself. Did the sections, did you know, the electron microscopy and all that kind of thing. But I worked very closely with other people in the department who were doing the research, and I published with them. And I think you'll notice that after I went to Tulane Medical School, almost every paper I've published it has more than one name on it because there were other individuals very much involved. When I was at the University of Texas, I did almost all the research myself.
I think that happens as you go through your career. When you first start out, you're it, and then you become more collaborative as you go on. Did you ever feel that you wanted to go back and spend more time in the research lab after you were chair?
I wanted to do that. I loved research. I love research. I still love it, but back in those days, I really loved it. I wanted to go back and do it all myself, but I couldn't do that because I had responsibilities for other people's forward movement, and you know, a lot of different things. And as chair of a department, I really couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And so I didn't. I just never did it.
Well, other than wanting to go to medical school and never quite getting there for understandable reasons, are there other things that you would have done differently as you look back on your career?
You know, I don't think so. If you look at the progress that's been made by research activities in the department, new approaches to research, different types of research, just like the electron microscope. You know, it's back when I first started histology. Let's just take histology and gross anatomy. When I first started, gross anatomy was almost a year, about 3/4 of a year. And histology was at least a half year, maybe a little bit longer than a half year. And now gross anatomy has been cut way down. and dissection time is way down and that kind of thing. I'm not really certain how different schools have done that. You know, some schools have cut out most of the dissections in the freshman year, but if students really needed that in the junior and senior years, then they could come back and do a lot of that in the department, and I'm not really sure about. You know, different schools have done it.
Some of that still happens. I think we still do it.
That's right. Yeah. But when I was a student, that was not possible. I just spent a lot of time in gross anatomy.
So what do you think about that change? Do you think that that's a negative change, a positive change, allow students to do other things?
I don't think it's negative. I really don't. I think it's another approach. We just have to see how it works out. If it works out, good. If it doesn't, then we can go back to the original approach. If you look at histology, you know, when I first started histology, did research initially in histology and then taught medical students and that kind of thing, and dental students. I taught dental students at the University of Alabama. But you know, what we really did was we used the microscope and we sectioned tissue and studied the tissue with the light microscope. And now they have new approaches to histology. Has totally new approaches to what they teach. You know, a lot of cell biology, a lot of you know, function of different cell structures and all that kind of thing. It's getting lower and lower and lower. When I go to the meetings, the American Association of Anatomists, when we go this year, I really shouldn't say this, and so maybe we can cut it off. But the papers that are presented at the meeting, I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I really don't understand what they're presenting. I'm not really sure that, you know, that it's to my advantage to go and listen to these different topics and that kind of thing. I really don't get much out of them. And there are a lot of papers presented at our meeting that fall into that category. But still, you know, I see a lot of good people and we have a lot of fun, and I do as much as I can about attending lectures and, you know, seeing what's going on, new things that are happening into life and to the field. I don't have anything negative about it. I think it's really quite good to approach these different topics, you know, new approaches, different areas, and all that kind of thing. Even histology, as I say, it's really modified.
Yeah, you've really seen quite an evolution over the years. And
I'll say this, and you may not agree, I'm happy with it. Even though I don't understand it, I'm still happy with it. You know, I think there's real progress being made in the field. And I hope that continues.
Do you think that there's been a shift, or can you speak to this? Do you think that there's been a shift from more morphological types of approaches when you were first starting out to more functional or even physiological types of approaches?
I think it's changed, yeah. I really do. I'm not really, I really wouldn't want to say how much it's changed, but I think it has changed. And it's, again, a subject that I'm certainly not negative on. I mean, it's a new approach, and we just have to wait and see how much it contributes and you know how effective the contribution is. I'm happy with it. I think we ought to change, you know, modify the way we approach things and that kind of thing as much as possible.
Can you speculate about what you think the future of anatomy as a discipline will be, either in education or research?
Well, let me say this, and you may not agree with it, but anatomy has got to be there. I mean, I can't imagine, I really truly cannot imagine a physician with no knowledge of anatomy. I just simply cannot imagine. I mean, they've got to know, any physician you go to, no matter what's wrong with you, they got to know something about anatomy before they understand what's wrong with you or what's likely to happen to you, or what approaches should be made and all that kind of thing. So I think anatomy is very basic, and it's essential for medical students. It's absolutely essential, in my judgment. It's absolutely essential. You know, as we've said here in the last few minutes, the way we've approached that's modified a little bit, changed a little bit, but it's not significant. Yeah, I think it's still, anatomy is very important. Yeah.
You know, I want to go back to the time you spent at Harvard for just a second, because one of the reasons that we want to capture some of this history is because, you know, many of us, I mean, you've been in the field longer than almost anybody, Bob, and many of us don't know some of the people or didn't know some of the people that you had the opportunity to work with too. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like working with Don Fawcett?
Yeah, I think there were a couple of problems with that, working with him. There were some other people in the department really quite good microscopists as well. But working with Fawcett, the difficulty was that he was probably gone 3 days out of every week the whole time I was there.
So you didn't see that much of him.
In addition to that, you got Saturday and Sunday. He was gone for 3 days. Sometimes he was gone for 2 straight weeks. And there were a couple of times or 3 times, maybe 4 times when he was there all week, but not very much.
Because he was traveling and...
Yeah, he did a lot of traveling. He really did. Yeah, that was a difficulty I had with him. I also went to Yale, you know.
You did?
Yeah, I was at Yale. And
tell us about that.
Yeah. Individual I worked with at Yale was Russ Barnett. And he was actually working not so much on the structure of cells, but on the function of cells in terms of whatever the function was, what organelles were associated with that function and that kind of thing. And so I was very much involved with him. He and I published some papers together. And also he had another person there, Joan Higgins, who I don't know what's ever happened to her, but she and I published together as well while I was there. And then shortly after I left and went back to I was in Galveston. Went back to Galveston, we published together as well.
So did you go to Yale after you were at Harvard?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And how long were you at Yale?
I was there, actually I went there twice. And I would, again, I'm not sure about the exact time, but I would say about 6 months. And really felt like I accomplished a lot and really did enjoy the stay there at Yale. So those are the 2 main places I went, Harvard and Yale.
You spent some time at Woods Hole, too.
Oh, yeah, I spent some time at Woods Hole.
Doing embryology?
Yeah, that's right. That was back, I was back in the late 50s. Yeah, I enjoyed that as well. And one of the main positive features of that is that the people who, I took a course, and there was no examination or anything in the course, or anything of that nature. So really, you know, and the people, the students in there were people who later became very, very good researchers and, you know, highly recognized individuals. But the professors that taught us were individuals that were really quite good, really quite good. They may still be that way, I'm not sure, but they were really quite good. And what we would do is, you know, we'd have lunch together, all of us, students and also the faculty. And in the evenings, and might not want this on the thing as well, but we'd go out and have a beer and that kind of thing, you know, and talk. And I really enjoyed the stay there. I really did. I felt like I accomplished a lot, not only with them and what I just said, but also in learning what they taught us. It was really quite good.
Yeah.
And yeah, I enjoyed that very much. I really did.
So your really active involvement at Tulane,
Yeah.
Ended with Katrina.
Yes, it did.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like?
Well,
if you don't mind.
Katrina was a major hurricane. Let me go back to Galveston.
Yeah.
Because in Galveston, you know, there still are, I think, major hurricanes each year. There's no way you can avoid that. Galveston's on an island that's out in the Gulf of Mexico. And these storms all originate in the Gulf. Well, they don't originate in the Gulf. They originate a little bit further east, not a little bit, but actually, well, good. You know what I mean? They're out in there. And they either enter the Gulf of Mexico or they go due north in the Atlantic. So the ones that enter the Gulf of Mexico, quite a large number of those storms went into Galveston. And when I was in Galveston, and I think it's still this way, and again, I don't want to be quoted on this, but I'd say there are 3 hurricanes a year. Now, you don't get the eye of every hurricane. They'll be out there, and some of them will go to the east of you, some will go to the west of you, others will come right across the island. And that was Hurricane Carla that I lived
Galveston.
In Galveston.
So you were not
really,
a stranger to this.
Truly can't believe that storm. And again, you don't know if there's really the storm or hurricanes associated with the storm or not, or something like that. Picked up 2-story homes and put them out in the middle of the street and turned them over on automobiles and things like that. Actually destroyed the city, a part of the city. So that was a major storm, and other storms I went through there as well. So when I went to New Orleans, I was very interested, not very interested, but well, in a way, interested in storms, and had been through quite a few.
Sounds like it.
And so when Katrina first appeared, the question was, you know, where is the eye going to enter? And it was in the Gulf of Mexico, coming towards New Orleans. But then, even now, we still see eyes like that out in the Gulf of Mexico. You know this, and both of you know this quite well. Some of them go further west rather than come into New Orleans. Others will go further east into Florida, into the panhandle of Florida, you know, that kind of thing. This one, I just said I'm not really sure about what I told Jane and I agreed, what we really should do as the eye of this storm approaches New Orleans. It'll probably turn off, go away, either east or west. And it continued to come north. And so Jane and I had to make a decision about what to do. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier. So we decided to leave New Orleans, and we went to Houston. And that's, I think I mentioned that to you earlier. But the home that I owned in New Orleans, I'd owned for quite a long time. I'd owned for over 30 years. And it's on the river, the Mississippi River. It's not right on the levee, but it's close to it. And that home is still there. And it is about, believe this now, 10 inches above sea level. And that's elevated in New Orleans.
Yeah.
So much of the city is 12 feet below sea level, that kind of thing. Yeah. And you know, when I went back, when I finally got back, my son was still there. And when I finally, and he went to my home. And when I finally got back, there was not 1/4 of an inch of water in my home. So I put it on the market. I just, well, let me back up a moment, because we had been up here, you know, until I could finally get back to New Orleans. When I finally got back to New Orleans, I wanted to, you know, clean the home and all that kind of thing, get things straightened out after the storm. It had been a long time, 3 months since the storm came in. And so Jane and I did that, but we got back in November. Yeah, we got back in November. Maybe it was October we got back. October and November we got back. Mm-hmm. And the house is in pretty good shape, you know, really no damage at all. So we decided, okay, we'll put it on the market. We'd been here for, you know, with Pamela, my daughter, we'd been here about 3 months. And 2 months, 2 to 3 months. And so we put it on the market in New Orleans. We put it on the market. It was on the market for 5 days, and there were 30 buyers.
There weren't so many houses left. So.
That's right.
So is that after the hurricane? Is that when you decided to retire? Because you weren't retired before that.
Yeah,
right?
I was retired before that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we decided to go ahead and sell it. Mm-hmm. But that we finally sold it in November, but we couldn't leave it until the end of January of the next year. Mm-hmm. And so we stayed there during that period. And we moved up here. I got here in this home. Well, 2 things happened at once. I bought this home and sold the one in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And the one I sold in New Orleans, you know, the homes there they're much more expensive than they are here. This one was, the one that we're in now was about $300,000. And the one in New Orleans I sold for over $800,000. Wow. So you know, mm-hmm. But we went ahead and sold it, and we had already purchased this one. Mm-hmm. When we sold the one in New Orleans, mm-hmm. And so let me go ahead just a little bit mm-hmm. further, because Jane was in fairly good health. She was older than I am, and she was in fairly good health, but she began to have a lot of difficulties with her kidneys. And she couldn't urinate or anything like that. And she also had some cardiac problems as well. And she died about over 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. She passed away. Mm-hmm. But we had already purchased this home and modified it. As you see
so
now.
she had been up here and gotten to live in the home before she
she loved
died.
this place. She loved it. And she was really the reason. She's the one that decorated all of this. Now, I didn't do it myself. And but she was really interested in this area, being close to my daughter, Pamela, mm-hmm. her husband, and my grandkids, and that kind of thing. So it worked out well for us.
So is that what keeps you busy these days? Family and grandchildren?
Right. I do that. I really am not as busy as I feel I really should be. I'll just have to wait and see how life develops and how I can modify my life and be more. I like, and you may not want this in. I'm also very much involved, very much interested in the church, mm-hmm. and I love the church, and it's Episcopal church, mm-hmm. and I love the church, and assist them in many ways and that kind of thing. I really enjoy mm-hmm. doing that. So I think I'll probably expand that relationship in the, maybe not the immediate future, but in the future as mm-hmm. we go along.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
So do you have a word of advice for some of the younger people that are just starting out, or even some of those who are sort of in the middle?
You mean the ones that are starting school?
Yeah, starting school, or say a young investigator who's just got his first faculty position, and, or her first faculty position.
Well, actually, if you consider the students who've just gotten their degrees and that kind of thing, they know what they should be doing. Well, to begin with, they had done their research in a totally different area as a rule than mm-hmm. what we did when you and I came along, what I did when I came along. But they've done their research in a different area, and they are positions that are needed and wanted, and that they really pretty much should be able to get involved in. Mm-hmm. And also the teaching, they're involved in teaching medical students. If they're in our department, they're involved in teaching medical students. And mm-hmm. So I really think that I think the opportunities are good for them. I really do. I feel they're good for them. Yeah.
Did you have particular difficulties during your career that you think might be instructive for the rest of us? And how did you solve those problems if you did?
Well, the main difficulties I had was with electron microscopy. You know, I mean, preparing tissues for electron microscopy. But everyone was having the same difficulties. I mean, and, you know, so I had that difficulty, and I finally accomplished the technique. But it came along very slowly.
So
very frustrating.
The embedding media were different then, I presume?
Embedding media were different. The sectioning media were different. That's back when we had, and I'm not sure now exactly what they do use. Back in those days, we had pieces of glass that we used to crack and make a cutting edge on those things, you know, and you would sit down. After a while, I got a little bit better with that. But when I first started, I would have maybe one knife out of all days glass cracking and that kind of thing, you know, and it was very different back in those days, totally different.
Learn to work through your frustrations. Research is always a little bit frustrating, but that sounds particularly frustrating.
That's right. Yeah.
So do you have any unfulfilled aspirations or things that you would have liked to do that you didn't?
Not really.
Yeah.
I really feel like, I really truly feel like I accomplished a lot. The papers I published, the original papers I published were very useful. The teaching that I've done to medical students, and if you look at the numbers of medical students are really physicians currently, you're looking at, you know, maybe close to 7,000 physicians that can look back on me as having taught them either gross anatomy or histology.
That's remarkable.
And, you know, I really feel good about what I accomplished. I don't think I'd want to change things. From my approach through the educational year, I don't really think I'd want to change things. I wouldn't want to monitor. The only thing that I really feel like I really should have done and should have gotten was an MD degree.
That came through clearly. Yeah, that's an unfulfilled.
You know, I had all the chances that I've been through to get the MD degree. Because really, seriously, I think we ought to think about this, and all people don't, and maybe they won't agree with it, but if you're teaching medical students, you really should have a medical degree. I mean, you really should know what they need to know, and different areas and that kind of thing. And you can still continue with anatomy or biochemistry, physiology, whatever, but you really need to know what medical students.
You could certainly make the connections with the clinical side if you had seen some of those things.
Yeah, that's right.
Sure.
That's right. Yeah.
Sure.
It's like if we try to teach in law school, we really can't do that. We don't know that much about, and even though we might try to learn, we have difficulty with that as well. And I just feel that people who teach medical students, whatever students you're teaching, you really should have the degree that they have. And you may not agree. Neither one of you may agree with that. I'm not certain, and I'm not sure that I 100% agree with it. But I think it would be very helpful to have the MD degree. And it's not necessarily the MD degree, it's the education that medical students have had, the different areas, the approach to medical sciences that receive they receive the MD degree. I think most of that we really should be exposed to. And you can say, I think we could also work that out with just a PhD degree for people in medical schools if they went ahead and had all of the subject matter that medical students have and take in their careers, in their training.
So you might recommend actually a different kind of training for our graduate students than we do now.
Yeah, I really do. I think that would help. And some schools may have done that. I'm just not certain about it. I really think it's not absolutely essential. I don't mean it from that point of view, but I think it'd be helpful.
Mm-hmm. No, I can see that point of view.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, even without the medical degree, you accomplished a remarkable amount during a very long career, Bob.
Yeah, well,
I think a lot to be proud of, and
yeah.
and really appreciate you sharing with us.
Well, I appreciate
I've
being
enjoyed chatting
with
you. So
yeah, we've had a good time, and I think the discussion was very good, and you know, I hope that whatever other people hear from what I have to say, they'll appreciate it and will utilize it.
I think they'll be very interested. That's the reason we wanted to do these interviews.
That's right. Yeah.
So good. Well, thank you very much.
Yes, indeed.
It's great
good to be with you.
talk
It really,
with you.
truly is.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.